Hi, my name is Cassie Johansson, and I'd like to talk to you today about the public policy of minimum wage. How many of you can imagine working a full-time minimum wage job during the summer and being able to afford college tuition? As a college student, I can only imagine being able to pay for my classes that way. But according to data from 1978, this used to be the case. A student could work a full-time 13-week minimum wage job during the summer and pay for their entire year of education. According to the same source, a student would now have to work a full-time minimum wage job for the entire calendar year to afford the same thing. To combat this extreme inflation, some cities in the United States have imposed their own minimum wage of $15, double what the federal government has set for our national minimum wage. Recently, a bill has been introduced to raise the Montana minimum wage to $10.10, a 25% increase from our current minimum wage of $8.05. I believe that this is a good start to a major problem, since it's improbable to double the minimum wage overnight. The new bill proposes that the increased minimum wage be adjusted yearly based on cost of living analysis. Backers of the bill, such as the State Department of Labor and Industry, believe that it's crucial to providing Montana workers with the purchasing power to buy food, fuel, rent, and other necessities. I'd like to show you why this change in public policy is the right decision for our state, even though the overall effect of an increased minimum wage is still up in the air. As with all problems, there are pros, such as providing a livable wage for our workers and keeping wages up with inflation, and cons, such as possible higher rates of unemployment. The minimum wage is what economists call a price floor, a restriction on how low the price of an item can go. The effect of these price floors depends on the equilibrium price that would be in place if not for the price floor. Minimum wage is a price floor set by the federal government. In a simple supply and demand model, this means that when minimum wage is set above the equilibrium market price, unemployment is created because more people are looking for jobs than there are jobs available. Employers hire fewer workers, but those workers have higher wages than without a minimum wage. The problem with this very, very simple economic model is that it makes assumptions that simplify the world, and these assumptions just don't hold true. There is research to suggest that raising the minimum wage would not increase the unemployment rate and could actually stimulate the economy. According to a letter written to Congress in 2014 by more than 600 economists and 7 Nobel Prize winners, a minimum wage increase could have a small stimulative effect on the economy, as low-wage workers spend their additional earnings, raising demand and job growth and providing some help on the jobs front. In a 2013 study done by the Chicago Fed, they found that increasing the minimum wage to even $9 would increase consumer spending by $28 billion. When spending, or in this case demand, increases, suppliers can actually afford to charge less for their goods and services because their overall revenue is still increasing. So on top of stimulating the economy, there is also research to suggest that raising the minimum wage could actually lower unemployment. In a 2014 Goldman Sachs analysis of 13 states who raised their minimum wage, all 13 states saw significant employment gains, with 9 out of 13 falling above the median employment rate for that time period. But the largest rate drop was in Rhode Island, the state who increased their minimum wage by the largest amount. They saw a decrease of 4.7% in unemployment over a 3-year span of time simply by raising their minimum wage by 35 cents. So by increasing our consumer spending and productivity and lifting millions out of poverty, raising the minimum wage doesn't cause unemployment. My next point is to explain how the minimum wage no longer meets a comfortable standard of living, which according to the man who created it, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was the point. Many people believe that the money needed to live comfortably can no longer be provided with a minimum wage job. According to data from Mary Dunwell, a representative in the Montana Senate, a single Montanan with no dependents needs about $14.10 an hour to afford their basic necessities. 20% of the Montanan workforce makes only about $8.15 and $10.10 an hour, meaning that at least 20% of our workforce is not even meeting their basic needs with their wages. That is not what FDR intended when he created the minimum wage. Another point I feel I should make is that the amount of Montanans not making enough to support themselves, let alone their families, means that it puts a strain on social services. When working a full-time job at the federal minimum wage of $7.25, a person makes about $165 a month, just above the federal poverty level. If that person has even one child, that puts them well below the federal poverty level, which means they're dependent on social services, which currently cost U.S. taxpayers about $152.8 billion a year. By raising the minimum wage, we reduce the amount of people reliant on social services, taxpayers can save money, and minimum wage workers can become self-sufficient. The other problem with the minimum wage that I'd like to mention is its inability to keep up with inflation. Because Congress sets the minimum wage, it's literally impossible for it to keep up with inflation. The cost of living is constantly rising, so the value of a new minimum wage begins to fall the moment it is set. Since it was last raised in 2009, the current federal minimum wage has lost about 8% of its purchasing power to inflation. This shows how quickly inflation can affect the minimum wage. This also shows why it would be in Montana's best interest to have a minimum wage that's adjusted yearly based on our cost of living analysis, since it would give the minimum wage a better chance of keeping up with inflation. It's for these reasons of stimulating the economy, providing for a comfortable standard of living, less strain on social services, and keeping up with inflation, that I truly believe that raising the minimum wage is in the best interest of Montanans' people and economy, which is why I support the change in public policy and the bill that has been introduced to our Senate.